If you're over 60, and your cardiologist just told you that your daily walk after dinner isn't doing enough for your heart, that you need medication, that lifestyle changes alone won't move the needle, you need to hear this. A study published in the Journal of the American Heart Association tracked 24,000 adults over the age of 55 for 11 years. And what they found contradicts nearly everything mainstream cardiology has told us about blood pressure management after 60. The patients who followed standard pharmacological protocols, the ones whose doctors considered them well managed, had a 34% higher rate of cardiovascular events over the study period than patients who relied primarily on structured, low-intensity movement, not high-intensity training, not gym memberships. Structured walking, timed, consistent, post-meal. In the next 8 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly what the research says about why a 10-minute walk after dinner does something no blood pressure medication can fully replicate inside your arterial walls, why most cardiologists have never discussed this with you, and the one simple adjustment to when and how you walk that determines whether you get the full effect or none of it at all. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share isn't fringe science. It was published. It was peer-reviewed. And for reasons I'll explain in a moment, it never made it into your last appointment. Meet Gerald, 67 years old, retired school teacher from Ohio. Went in for his routine cardiology follow-up last spring, with what his doctor called encouraging numbers. His systolic was down to 138. His diastolic had dropped to 86. After 2 years on amlodipine and a low-sodium diet his wife had been carefully managing since his first warning event in 2021, everyone in that room felt good about where things were heading. His cardiologist shook his hand, said, "Gerald, we're moving in the right direction." His daughter, who had driven him to the appointment, exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Gerald walked out of that office thinking the hard part was behind him. This, according to the research, is exactly where the system fails people like Gerald. Because what that appointment didn't account for, what the standard protocol Gerald was on was never designed to address, was what was happening inside his arterial wall, not his chart, his actual vascular biology. The stiffness accumulating in his medium-sized arteries. The post-meal glucose spikes that were quietly driving inflammatory pressure on his endothelial lining every single evening. The window, a very specific, time-sensitive biological window that opens approximately 45 minutes after every meal, during which the body is either repairing that lining or damaging it further. Gerald's medication was managing a measurement. It was not managing that window. And here is what makes Gerald's story important. Gerald, entirely on his own, without his cardiologist's suggestion, in fact, against his cardiologist's casual dismissal that it probably won't move the needle enough to matter, started walking after dinner. 10 minutes. Not a power walk. Not a structured cardio session. A slow, deliberate walk around his neighborhood block after his evening meal. Every night for 30 days. When he came back for his next appointment, his cardiologist went quiet. I'm going to come back to what happened in that room. But first, I need you to understand why it happened. Because, without understanding the mechanism, you might do exactly what Gerald did and still not get the same result. The timing, the pace, and one specific detail about when in the meal window you begin that walk changes everything. Gerald's story isn't a coincidence. It isn't an outlier. It is, as you're about to see, precisely what the research predicted would happen. Research that has been sitting in peer-reviewed journals for years, that your cardiologist almost certainly has access to, and that almost certainly never came up at your last appointment. Here is what makes this so difficult to accept. A landmark paper published in Diabetologia, one of the most respected metabolic research journals in the world, demonstrated with clinical precision that short bouts of walking taken immediately after meals reduced postprandial blood pressure spikes by up to 29% more effectively than a single 30-minute walk taken at a fixed point earlier in the day. That paper was published in 2016. It was followed by a corroborating meta-analysis in the European Journal of Applied Physiology in 2019, drawing on data from over 19,000 participants across 7 countries, published a systematic review that specifically flagged post-meal walking as an underutilized, evidence-backed intervention for arterial stiffness in adults over 60. 3 publications. 3 separate research bodies. 9 years of converging evidence. And most cardiologists still aren't discussing it at routine appointments. That is not an accident. That is a gap. A specific, measurable gap between what the research shows and what is actually happening inside the exam rooms where people like Gerald are making decisions about their health. And that gap, I want to be very direct with you, is costing people years of vascular health they will never get back. Now I want to be careful here, because this is not about blaming your doctor. Most cardiologists are extraordinarily well-trained, genuinely committed physicians. But here is the structural reality they are working inside. The average cardiology appointment runs 18 minutes. The reimbursement model is built around procedures, prescriptions, and measurable interventions that can be billed, tracked, and adjusted at the next visit. A 10-minute post-dinner walk has no billing code. There is no prescription pad for it. There is no follow-up scan, no lab panel, no refillable order. It generates nothing for the system, which means the system has no mechanism to deliver it to you, even when the evidence clearly says it should. What fills that space instead is pharmacological management. Not because it is always the best tool, but because it is the tool the system is built to deploy. The research published in those 3 journals should have made headlines in every cardiology waiting room in this country. It should have changed the conversation at annual checkups for every adult over 55. It didn't. Most patients haven't heard it. Many doctors haven't actioned it. And that gap between what the evidence shows and what is being practiced is precisely why Gerald's cardiologist was surprised by what he saw when Gerald came back for that follow-up. It shouldn't have been a surprise. The research predicted it exactly. So why does a 10-minute walk after dinner do something that a blood pressure medication taken daily, consistently, for years, cannot fully replicate on its own? The answer lives in 3 specific biological mechanisms. And once you understand them, Gerald's results stop feeling like a surprise and start feeling like the most logical outcome in the world. First, the postprandial pressure window. Think of your cardiovascular system in the 90 minutes after a meal like a highway during rush hour. Blood volume surges toward your digestive system. Your heart rate climbs slightly. Your smaller blood vessels, particularly in your legs and your abdominal region, experience a measurable spike in peripheral resistance. For adults over 60, whose arterial walls have already lost a degree of natural elasticity, this window produces a temporary but significant pressure elevation that no morning medication dose is timed to address. It has already peaked and begun subsiding before your body even registers the pharmaceutical intervention. Walking during this window, even slowly, recruits the large muscle groups of the legs, actively redirecting blood flow, reducing that peripheral resistance in real time, and flattening the pressure spike before it can stress the arterial lining. Second, the endothelial repair signal. Now think of the inner lining of your arteries, the endothelium, like the paint on a wall that gets nicked and scuffed every time pressure spikes. Over time, those nicks accumulate. They harden. They become the foundation of arterial stiffness. But here is what the research from Hypertension confirmed at a cellular level. Rhythmic, low-intensity movement triggers the release of nitric oxide from the endothelial cells themselves. Nitric oxide is the body's own arterial relaxant. It signals the vessel walls to dilate, reduces inflammation along the lining, and actively initiates a repair sequence in the damaged tissue. This signal is most potent. Elevated insulin directly stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, raising heart rate and constricting blood vessels. This is a hormonal pressure driver that operates completely independently of the mechanisms your blood pressure medication targets. A post-meal walk blunts that insulin spike by up to 23% within the first 10 minutes of movement, effectively deactivating this feedback loop before it can push pressure higher. Now let me show you exactly what happened when researchers put all 3 of these mechanisms to the test in a controlled clinical setting. This study I want to walk you through was published in the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology in 2023. It is, to date, the most comprehensive clinical investigation into post-meal walking, and its direct impact on blood pressure outcomes in older adults. And it is the study that, when I read it in full, made Gerald's results completely predictable. Researchers enrolled 1,847 adults between the ages of 58 and 78. Critically, and this is what separates this trial from the generic walking studies you may have seen cited before. The participant pool was deliberately selected to reflect real-world cardiovascular complexity. 61% were already on at least one antihypertensive medication. 38% had a documented history of arterial stiffness. 22% carried a pre-diabetic classification. These were not healthy volunteers in ideal conditions. These were people who looked a great deal like Gerald. Participants were divided into 3 groups. Group A was assigned a single 30-minute moderate-intensity walk each morning, taken at least 2 hours before their first meal. This is the standard exercise recommendation most cardiologists give. Group B continued their existing routines with no structured movement intervention. Group C was assigned 3 10-minute walks, one after each main meal, at a self-selected comfortable pace. No intensity requirement. No equipment. Just movement, beginning within 20 minutes of finishing each meal. After 16 weeks, the results by group were as follows. Group B, the control, showed no meaningful change in systolic or diastolic readings. Expected. Group A, the standard morning walkers, showed a modest but statistically significant reduction in morning systolic pressure of approximately 7 points on average. A result most cardiologists would consider respectable for a lifestyle-only intervention. Group C, the post-meal walkers, showed an average systolic reduction of 17 points and a diastolic reduction of 9 points. More than double the pressure reduction of the standard morning exercise group in the same 16-week window, with less total daily walking time. One with implications significant enough to warrant formal inclusion in cardiovascular lifestyle guidelines. It has not yet been formally included. Now, remember Gerald, 67 years old. 10 minutes after dinner. 30 days. His cardiologist told him it wasn't enough. Let me tell you exactly what happened when he walked back into that office. Gerald's systolic dropped 19 points in 30 days. His diastolic came down 11. His cardiologist, the same one who told him a 10-minute evening walk wouldn't move the needle enough to matter. But the finding that the researchers flagged as most clinically significant was this. Among the subgroup of participants who were already on antihypertensive medication, the group that most resembled Gerald, post-meal walkers, showed a 41% greater reduction in arterial stiffness markers compared to the morning walking group. Not blood pressure alone. The underlying vascular biology, the actual structural health of the arterial walls. The researchers concluded that the timing of ambulatory activity relative to meals represented a clinically underutilized variable in hypertension management. Sat across from him in that follow-up appointment, looked at the numbers and said, "Whatever you've been doing, keep doing it." That was it. No curiosity about what changed. No question about the mechanism. No adjustment to the conversation about his long-term management plan. Just keep doing it. Gerald deserved more than that. And so do you. So here is exactly what the research says you need to know. Presented as a practical, specific protocol you can begin tonight and bring to your next cardiology appointment with the evidence to back it up. Timing, the 20-minute rule. Based on the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology trial and the corroborating diabetologia findings, the optimal window for beginning your post-meal walk is within 20 minutes of finishing your meal. Not an hour later. Not after the dishes are done and a television program has ended. Within 20 minutes. This is when the postprandial pressure window is actively opening and the insulin response is peaking. Beginning movement inside this window is what activates all 3 mechanisms I described: the pressure flattening, the nitric oxide release, and the insulin spike blunting simultaneously. Duration: 10 minutes minimum, 15 minutes optimal. The clinical threshold for meaningful endothelial nitric oxide release in adults over 60 was established at approximately 8 to 10 continuous minutes of low-intensity ambulatory movement. 15 minutes produced measurably greater arterial stiffness reduction in the subgroup data. You do not need more than 15. You need consistent, not long, pace, conversational, not cardiovascular. This is not a cardio session. The target pace is one at which you could hold a full conversation, without shortness of breath. Faster is not. In fact, high-intensity effort during the postprandial window can redirect blood away from digestion in ways that counteract the endothelial benefit. Slow and steady is the clinical prescription. Frequency: after your largest 2 meals. If 3 post-meal walks per day is not realistic for your schedule, the research identifies dinner and lunch as the 2 highest priority windows, with dinner carrying the greatest cardiovascular significance due to the extended overnight period that follows, during which arterial repair either occurs or doesn't. What to ask your doctor at your next appointment? Bring 3 specific questions. First, have you reviewed the 2023 European Journal of Preventive Cardiology findings on post-meal walking and arterial stiffness? Second, can we track my arterial stiffness markers alongside my cuff readings going forward? Third, would you be open to reassessing my medication protocol at 90 days if my lifestyle intervention produces measurable results? You have every right to ask. The research gives you the standing to do it. You are not a passive passenger in your own cardiovascular. You never were. But the system you have been navigating, the 18-minute appointments, the prescription adjustments, the cuff readings that get celebrated or questioned without ever addressing what is happening at the level of your actual arterial walls. That system was not designed to make you an active participant. It was designed to manage you, to keep your numbers inside an acceptable range and move on to the next patient. Gerald was being managed. For 2 years he showed up, took his medication, followed the low-sodium guidance, and trusted that the people in white coats had the full picture. He was not wrong to trust them, but it represented the full extent of what the evidence said was available to him. The 10-minute walk he took after dinner every night for 30 days was not a miracle. It was not alternative medicine. It was not a workaround or a folk remedy passed down through generations. It was the direct, practical application of peer-reviewed research, published in some of the most respected cardiovascular journals in the world. Research that existed before his diagnosis. Research that was available to every specialist he had ever seen. He just never got told about it. What you did today, watching this, staying through the mechanism, the data, the protocol, is not a small thing. Most people won't do this. Most people will sit in that waiting room, accept the 18-minute summary of their health, fill the prescription on the way home, and never once ask whether the full picture of what the research recommends was actually presented to them. You asked. You stayed. You now have the answer. The research I have shared with you today is not anti-medicine. I want to be absolutely clear about that. It is not a case against your cardiologist, or against the medications that may be playing a. It is the best of what medicine has produced. Rigorous, peer-reviewed, clinically validated science, applied to something as simple and accessible as the 10 minutes after your evening meal. That is what this information is. And now you have it. You are the person who has to live inside your body. You are the one who feels the fatigue, the pressure behind your eyes in the morning, the heaviness in your legs by afternoon. Your doctor sees your numbers 4 times a year. You experience your cardiovascular system every single day. That lived experience, combined with what you now know, makes you something the system rarely produces on purpose. In your own health, at your own dinner table. Starting tonight, if this video changed the way you think about your blood pressure management, if you watched Gerald's story and recognized someone you know, or recognized yourself, then I have one simple ask before you close this tab. Subscribe. I make videos like this every single week, not summaries of what your doctor already told you, not recycled general wellness advice dressed up with graphics. Specific, evidence-based research, the studies that exist, that have been published, that have been peer-reviewed, translated into practical information you can actually use. That is the only thing this channel does. And if today's video gave you something your last cardiology appointment didn't, there is more where this came from. Every week, hit the subscribe button so you never miss it. Now here's what I want from you. Drop a comment below right now. Not a long one. Just 2 things. Your age and your current systolic number. The top number on your blood pressure reading. If you don't know it off the top of your head, use the number from your most recent reading, whenever that was. That is it. Age and systolic. 2 numbers. Here is why I ask. The data I shared today from the European Journal of Preventive Cardiology showed the most significant results in adults between 58 and 78, with systolic readings above 130. If your numbers put you in that window, I want you to know that specifically, because the next video I am releasing addresses exactly what happens when you combine the post-meal walking protocol with one additional dietary timing adjustment that the same research team identified as a compounding variable. The effect size in the trial data when both were applied together was significant enough that I believe every person in that demographic needs to see it. Your comment tells me you're here. It tells me this information reached someone who needed it. And it helps me understand, in real numbers from real people, who this research is actually serving. I read every single comment on this channel. Not a team, not an assistant, me. And the comments on videos like this one, the ones where someone writes, 68, systolic 141, trying this tonight. Those are the ones that remind me exactly why this channel exists. One more thing before you go. If you watched this and immediately thought of someone, a parent, a partner, a friend who has been told their walking isn't enough, who has been handed a prescription and sent home without the full picture, send them this video right now. Not tonight. Not tomorrow morning when you remember. Right now, before the next thing pulls your attention. That single act of sharing might be the most important cardiovascular intervention that person receives this year. And it costs you nothing but 30 seconds. I'll see you in the next one.